many of them, that they're optimistic and that a lot of them actually very much support what we're doing here in terms of trying to make this street work better overall and make sure the 65,000 people who travel along the street can do so. And in the end, it's not a surprise that fewer cars are using the street and are using other streets, as was exactly the intention. What we tried to make sure of in advance of the pilot project just 8 weeks ago was that there was adequate capacity, which it seems quite certain there is, on those streets. And there'll be more data out on that next week in the monthly data that will be put out. I don't know what it's going to say myself yet, but I'm just saying that we're measuring all of that so you can see that for yourselves. But in the end, we're also measuring pedestrian traffic on the street. I mean, let's not forget that we've just been through 7 or 8 of the coldest days in 50 years, not 50 days. And so, again, we're going to take this 1 week and 1 day and 1 month at a time. We are 8 weeks into a 1-year pilot project. We are here today announcing a series of initiatives designed to get people walking along this street and being active on the street as they have been before. We are launching a unique design competition which is meant to animate this street in the months to come. Just think for a minute, and I think a lot of people can think very fondly of the time when TIFF was on, and for just a couple of short days we had the street closed and some of that public space was used during that time for outdoor cafes and so on. We are now inviting the very same businesses to take advantage of that opportunity on this very same street going forward all year long, and to have other kinds of creative uses of that we're inviting the people to tell us about. And I think that's very exciting. And change is often challenging, but that doesn't mean you don't do it. If we're going to make this into a 21st century city that works for everybody, then we're going to have to go through some periods of change, and I'm standing behind those changes as the right thing to do for the city, and standing with my colleagues doing that, and we're going to make changes and listen and learn, but we're going to continue to make the changes we have to make the city work.
Mayor Tory, businesses have suggested allowing vehicles back on the roads, during that typical 8 p.m. dinner rush and on the weekends as well. Is that at all a consideration?
We are meeting on a very regular basis. Councillor Cressy's involved, Councillor Thompson's involved. We're meeting with our transportation officials and others to continuously review the pilot project and how it's working. But you have to strike a balance between an idea somebody's come up with and have said that's the one idea that they think is going to solve their problems. You have to balance that against the fact we are 8 weeks into a 1-year pilot project, and that you have to make sure that you are making these decisions in a sensible, thoughtful, considered way. That is why we're having another meeting with the same group of business people on Friday of this week to hear how things are going for them, to hear the expressions of concern that we've seen in the media, and to listen very carefully to what they're saying. But at this time, I can't tell you that any particular decisions have been made, because they haven't, with respect to changing the program, other than the positive things that we're doing today to animate the street and to look forward to the coming months and getting people to use their creativity to do something that I think is going to be magnificent on the street in terms of bringing it even further to life, beyond even what was happening last summer before the pilot project began.
Since this is a pilot, though, is there any consideration to maybe augment this, that it is more of a win-win like you?
When it is a pilot project, by definition, it means you have the ability to change it as you need to do to make it work better in every respect, to make the streetcars work better, to make businesses work better, and so on. And I am specifically telling you that we are watching and looking at this pilot project and how it's doing and listening to the concerns of people like businesses every single day. And so that I guess what that means is that change is possible, but I can't tell you today that there's been any decision taken by anybody to make the one change that has been floated in the newspaper. I am telling you that we're sitting down and talking to these people that I'm visiting here, our officials are visiting, we're measuring, and we're going to take it as it comes. This pilot project will not be ended early. We're going to see it through. We're going to watch, we're going to listen, we're going to add things to it as we're doing today. We're going to take initiatives, we're going to make changes as we have to make them, small and perhaps larger. But the bottom line is that the pilot project is going forward. We made a very considered decision that we had to make King Street work better, that we had to have a situation where streetcars were moving faster than people walking down the sidewalk. That didn't make any sense. Who won out of that? 65,000 people sure didn't, who were just trying to get to work every day and trying to get home. And now they're telling me, and I run into them, by the way, lots of them, who tell me that they are sometimes saving 15 or 20 minutes each way twice a day. And that means a lot to them in terms of their ability to get to their kids' events or to pick their kids up or just to get home for dinner and put their feet up. And so we have to balance that, and that very important consideration against, obviously, changes other people might be seeking. And we'll be listening very carefully and watching very carefully, but the pilot project is going to continue, and it has my full and complete support in that regard, because that's what you have to do to have a 21st century city. I don't even know the answer to that question. Do you know?
Details to be worked out.
Details to be worked out, but they are being given the first opportunity to say, yes, I'd like to make use of it, and then they have to tell us what they want to do with it, so it's not just a matter of saying we're handing it over to them. I can't honestly answer that question about I know what you're saying. Go ahead.
So there are 15 sites that have been identified for new public spaces, along with 2 sites that have been identified for new parkettes as installations. The call for proposals goes out today. Local businesses in front of them have the first crack at these spaces, and we're excited and looking forward to working with those local businesses. If they're not interested, then it goes out to the public call for those expressions of interest. The deadline for applications is in mid-February. There is going to be, in the world of the city, a rapid turnaround whereby by mid-April these spaces will be open and will go until the end of the year and the end of the pilot. And of course there is the opportunity, all things being equal, for things to be made permanent. As Councillor Thompson mentioned, though, while this process from a city perspective will move in quick speed by mid-April, the city's Economic Development and Culture Department is already working for interim animation initiatives between now and April. So the jugglers, the fire spinners, all the entertainers and those pop-ups are happening right away. And so that's the update on those 17 spaces. So as the Mayor said, the details are still being finalized.
But we understand your question, but you don't know the answer to that yet. We can't give you that.
Just as estimate for all of this in the city, is there one, and how much is
Do you know I mean, it's modest.
Yeah. At the moment, we haven't finalized that details, but as the Mayor just pointed out, it's a modest investment. In fact, it's a type of investment that we'd want to naturally make when we make these types of changes or addition to the pilot program. I mean, the recognition, as the Mayor has stated, pilots are such that you put it in place and you determine as you move forward what elements need to be adjusted or augmented and so on, recognizing that the businesses are extremely important, recognizing that people traveling on the streetcars on King Street have gone through such hardship in terms of getting to where they need to get to. The Mayor has taken the leadership in terms of addressing this. We recognize as well that businesses are extremely important to the community and the jobs and so on that's taking place. What we are trying to do right now is to address the concerns that have been brought forward by the business community and others as well, and we are going to incorporate some modest amount of city resources to assist this. We are experts with respect to winterlicious and summerlicious programs and so on, so Eats on King is really an additional element that we will incorporate to really benefit the businesses and the performers and so on that you will see that will animate the street. In fact, it's a great benefit not only for the restaurants and business but also for the people who will be attracted to this area that will benefit everyone.
Yes. If there's any incremental cost, it'll be absolutely infinitesimal, let alone modest. I mean, it is just the whole cost of the whole pilot project, frankly, has been very modest, but it's a big change, and that's why we're having to watch very carefully as you bring about big changes. But the notion of not bringing about the big changes and just having the status quo or going back to the status quo, I don't know how anybody could possibly contemplate going back to a world where streetcars traveled slower than people walking down the sidewalk. I have no idea how anybody could responsibly put that forward in a city that's growing rapidly and modernizing itself. You know what? Absolutely none. Because if you're confident that what you're doing is the right thing to try and move the city forward, subject to change, that's why we're doing it as a pilot project and not as some permanent decision that this is the way it's going to be, then I feel that what people will recognize is that we've shown the leadership, all of us collectively here together with the TTC and others, to move forward and place a priority on moving people better in this city and making the kind of changes that, quite frankly, no one else made over previous years. People just were prepared to let streetcars go along King Street slower than people could walk. I wasn't, Councillor Cressy wasn't, Councillor Thompson wasn't, the TTC wasn't, and most importantly, the 65,000 people who use those streetcars every day shouldn't have been prepared to accept that, because it's not acceptable. And so, to me, this is the kind of leadership people expect, and that in the context of an election, you just do what you think is right, and I think people normally say yes to that, because they understand that while it isn't perfect, and while you have to watch change as you implement it, that it's the right thing to do to move forward and try something. We are having meetings, and we've said very clearly, including to the business people directly, that we're examining every one of those things all the time. But what you have to do is make sure you maintain the integrity of what's got the streetcars moving faster. And so that any change you contemplate making at the request of business or anybody else is a change that can't ruin, or negatively affect the improvements that have come about. So we're in a constant listening and watching mode. That's why I've been down here so many times myself personally, to watch and to listen and to ask questions, and to ask questions of the TTC people when they come to see us. We're having meetings all the time with the city staff to review the data and to review options. But what we're saying is that we're not here today to announce any fundamental changes to this, but we're certainly willing to watch and listen and learn and make changes that are going to help both keep the streetcars moving and make sure business stays healthy and happy. And today we're here doing some things that I think will contribute to that without altering the pilot project at all. Just makes it better. Let's take a couple more and then we're going to go. When we look at the pilot, we don't confine ourselves to looking at east or west or north or south. We're looking at the whole thing. And so the programs we're talking about today that, as Councillor Thompson said, will liven up the street right away, those are across the pilot project area. The competitions and the public spaces we're talking about livening up later in the year are across the pilot area. And as we look at any other kinds of changes, including things that are happening quietly, like tweaking of traffic signals and so on, those things of course happen where they're needed, whether it's east or west. And so we look at the thing as a whole project, a whole pilot area, and every consideration that we look at is done in that context. Yes? I think we'd be making a mistake if we measured the mobility benefits, in other words, to transit passengers, in dollars. We're measuring it in their time, and we're able to measure that in terms of both the reliability of and the speed of the streetcars going along King Street. And if you remember, when we announced this, all of us, the main expressed purpose of it, and I don't run away from that, in fact I embrace it wholeheartedly, was to get this transit system moving properly on a major transit route, the biggest surface transit route in the city, behind only the subways and the number of people it carries. And so we'll be able to measure that. We are measuring this 9 different ways, if not 99 different ways, and we will see what the benefits are for transit passengers. And then we will also see, of course, we're measuring business impact and sidewalk traffic. We're measuring all those things, and we are looking at that continuously as we measure. That's why we're doing it. And so, go ahead.
Just coming back to the objectives of the project, economic prosperity, both citywide and locally, is an objective. So in the downtown core where the pilot project is, 1/3 of all the jobs in the entire city are located here. It produces this core 51% of the city's GDP. And the Toronto Region Board of Trade has said very clearly that our region is losing $6 billion a year in lost productivity due to gridlock. And so in looking at economic prosperity, getting people to and from work quicker, ensuring that people aren't stuck in their cars on the way to a meeting, ensuring that deliveries can happen sooner, that's part of ensuring citywide economic productivity for a growing metropolis like Toronto is. But just as citywide economic prosperity is critical for the future, so is the local vitality and vibrancy of the businesses here. And that's why to ensure that we work with and support them and animate this street is equally and just as important as the citywide economic imperative.